The 48th sequel will revisit the arrest of Kabarega and Mwanga, but this time not using the version of Ham Mukasa, but now using the version of Apolo Kaggwa. The difference is not that big, but there are a few details that will come up. And then, of course, we shall see how the marching through Kenya to Somaliland and to the Seychelles happened also. So basically, that is today's sequel. Welcome. The producer, my name is Christopher Amos Chikomeko Ntambi. Now, according to Apolo Kaggwa, reports that he's the one who gave intelligence to the British, and the major hunt for the deposed Mwanga and Kabarega began based on the letter he had received and how he had followed the messenger who brought the letter from Mwanga. Now he says that the troops had surrounded Lango sub-region swamps and that they lay siege for 6 months so as to monitor the movements of both the deposed Kabaka and Omukama. So it was realized that the deposed kings had a force of up to 500 soldiers, including Nubians. So the commander or the chief of the East, Semei Kakungulu, was alerted, and so were the Lango chiefs. After the 6 months, a combined force of British troops, Semei Kakungulu native forces, and the Punjani soldiers attacked the Lake Choga swamps. The troops of the deposed king put up a spirited defense. They did not know that they had been surrounded, and the actual location of the fugitive kings had also become very well known. And on the 9th of April 1899, a fierce battle ensued with an exchange of bullets and spears. Casualties on both sides were immense, and close to 350 soldiers fell dead in the swampy waters. Chief Kutu led one soldier away from the fierce fighting and promised British Colonel Trevor Tannen to show him the hideout of the deposed kings. And so he sent Bakulembeze to get Commander Semei Kakungulu from the front line. Both men then headed to Yombo, Amolata, where they found both the deposed kings fully armed. Kabarega fired his gun, and Semei Kakungulu shot him back, but faster. And therefore it was Semei Kakungulu who hit Kabarega's right arm. Bakulembeze overwhelmed the deposed Mwanga II, who surrendered by show of both hands. Colonel Trevor brought forth a unit of Indian soldiers, and both Mwanga and Kabarega were arrested. They gave first aid to Kabarega's hand as he insulted them, but they ignored him. Before long, his hand had begun to rot, and a medical practitioner and surgeon, Dr. Haig, advised that it be cut off, and so it was. During the dressing of Kabarega's wound, he kicked the doctor's back, who confessed that he did not mind since it was a royal action. You know, these days we wonder at things that are done to people and you feel like it doesn't matter. It was done by royalty. So that is the way the doctor behaved. And Dr. Haig was a Mzungu, but he knew about royal blood, and that's the way he reacted. Now, crowds gathered in Impala to have a glance at the fugitive kings, but they were heavily guarded. They were cheered, especially by the Christian factions as they passed through Entebbe. as they passed through Impala to go to Mengo Hill. Apolo Kaggwa was so worried, fearing a surprise attack, and warned Tayari to keep some forces on alert until the prisoners were gone. So that explains the huge number of the Punjani soldiers around the fugitives. Then to Munyonyo, where they boarded the steamer Clement Hill, and the steamer this time round had no other passengers, and it sailed straight to Port Florence, or call it Kisumu. So that is the Apolo Kaggwa version. As you can see, it doesn't change much from the Ham Mukasa version. As a matter of fact, I think the only thing it has given out is how they came to arrest the two, and maybe the injuring of the Omukama. Now, because of the Nandi menace, the Indian army kept watch over the route with a bigger force, and they passed through safely to Naivasha. The Leyre was not yet open to St. Florence, and so the road took longer, and by the time they reached Naivasha, they were very tired. Secondly, it was after entering Naivasha that they truly regarded themselves out of Uganda, and so out of danger. By that time, Uganda extended that far. The prisoners were therefore allowed to relax in makeshift tents. Local women from both the Maasai and the Kikuyu brought local brew and foods. Now, whereas Mwanga had carried 2 concubines with him, Kabarega had not, and therefore Kabarega spent a night with one of the Kikuyu ladies called Wambui. The following day, the prisoners and their Indian army captors, as well as porters, broke camp and continued on to Nyahururu, then Nanyuki, then Meru, then Garissa, then Bura, to Jubadaland, Colbio in the Italian Somaliland. They then headed towards the Indian Ocean at Burgabo Port, where they took a boat to Port Kismayo, arriving in December 1899. The long route was agreed to take care of any suspected rescue mission by the Arabs of Zanzibar or from Tanganyika, had they taken the route to Mombasa, or had they took a ship from Mombasa. This research is a departure from all the books that have ever written about the marching of Mwanga and Kabarega. They all say they were taken to Mombasa, from Mombasa to Seychelles Islands. Then some books say from Mombasa to Port Kismayo. Now, all that has been proved wrong by the archives at the National Archives of Uganda. Mwanga and Kabarega were never taken to Mombasa. The route was through the interior of Kenya, and the reasons have been given. They were fearful of a rescue by forces from Tanganyika or even Zanzibar, so they could not risk to go to Mombasa. It is very, very clear from the records that because we do not want to read, we do not want to research, we all assumed they went to Mombasa. They did not. Now, Apolo Kaggwa must have narrated to Tayari what happened to Queen Mother Warioka in 1876 at sea between Zanzibar and Bagamoyo, and therefore a repeat was feared. All these are reasons for them not to pass through Mombasa. The steamer ship booking at Mombasa for the expected prisoners had since been proved to have been a diversionary tactic, says the documents at the National Archives. Now, that proved that Britain was so worried about any eventualities as long as the great prisoners were still in transit at Port Kismayo. Port Kismayo had a very big garrison of the Sea Company King African Rifles. That is where Mwanga II and Kabarega were camped. The over 100 Indian soldiers were Punjani soldiers, and from there they were being put on ships to be returned home to their bases in India. A message from the Italian Somaliland governor, Ernesto Dullio, had given orders for both Mwanga II and Kabarega to remain as prisoners in the military garrison for 16 months, in what he referred to in writing as Port Kismayo in the mouth of River Juba, which powered its waters into the ocean. The porters who gallantly accompanied Mwanga II and Kabarega to Burgabo port had a long return journey home. On arrival at Naivasha in July 1900, they were received warmly as Kabarega's Kikuyu concubine Wambui had delivered a bouncing baby boy. Despite the one-night stand in June 1899, she became pregnant and gave birth in April 1900. The porters named the boy after his father, Johanna, or call it Johnson Kabarega. Historians have since recorded that Wambui got married and abandoned her son's name Kabarega in favor of her new husband and her son's foster father, who was called Kamau. So the son became Johnson Kamau. However, when her son grew up, he rejected his foster father's name and adopted the Maasai names of the place where he was born. In Kikuyu, a child is a follows a matrilineal succession. So therefore, this boy was always to look at his mother as the ancestry, not Kabarega's ancestry. Now, matrilineal societies in Africa are very few. The Kikuyu of Kenya, the Akamba of Kenya, the Kosa of South Africa, and the Asante of Ghana are the most celebrated and the biggest matrilineal societies. Your birth ancestry follows your mother, not your father. And therefore, this Johnson Kamau was to get ancestry from her Kikuyu mother, not Kabarega. Therefore, his mother told him a false birthday, making him older by 8 years to conceal his Ugandan identity. When the boy grew into a big man, he had the likeness of Kabarega, bearded beards, and looked exactly like his father. Meanwhile, back home in Uganda, Apolo Kaggwa invited to the second ordination of African priests in January 1899, as we shall see in tomorrow's sequel. May the good Lord bless us all. Amen.